I need to know, I need to know, I need to know. You need to know, you need to know, you need to know. We all need to know. Because you need to know, because I need to know, because we all need to know. We have to rightly divide the scripture. What do you know about the book of Exodus chapter 33 verse 3? Exodus chapter 33 verse 3. A lot of people says God neglected them. He doesn't want to follow them. What is the purpose? What is the reason? What is the teaching? What do you understand in that place? What is God telling us? So what is Exodus 33:3 saying? It says, unto a land flowing with milk and honey, for I will not go in the midst of thee, for thou art a stiff-necked people, lest I consume thee in the way. God says, I don't want to follow you, so that I will not consume you. Can God consume? What is your answer? Can God consume? Can God destroy? What is your answer? We are going to find out. What is the historical context? We know the author is Moses. The audience here is the Israelites during their wilderness journey after being delivered from Egypt. So what is the situation that warrants, that makes such a statement? This verse followed the incident when they made a calf, a golden calf, in the book of Exodus chapter 32, where Israel sinned gravely against God by idolatry. They now have another God. God has promised to give them Canaan land, the land of promise, but they are rebellious, they are strained, they rebellious, they are stiff-necked people, they are stubbornness. So now made the strain, the covenant to be, the relationship now as if it's sour. Is it sour? Is God really angry with them? Is God ready to destroy them? So let's see one after the other. The literary context. So chapter 33 is part of narratives where God expresses his displeasure with Israel, but still promise to fulfill. Okay, what you are doing now is bad, but I'm still keeping my promise. God is not human being that if he promise you something, because you sin, because you don't greet him, because you don't, he will now withhold that promises. No. When you see that place, God, despite his displeasure with Israel, but he still promised them, because they are not the one that he promised. He promised Abraham. He promised Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. So it precedes Moses' intercession in the book of Exodus 32, verse 12 to 23, where Moses pleaded for God's presence to remain with them. So what is the key word that you need to understand for you to be able to interpret this verse very well? It talks about a land. It talks about a flowing with milk and honey. It also talks about stiff-necked. It also talked about consume. 4 things. Let's look at it one after the other in the Hebrew context. Land means a rest. A rest. A rest means a physical land of Canaan. Number 2, it talks about milk. That is a land flowing. Land flowing with milk and honey. Meaning flowing with milk and honey in Hebrew text means Zavat Shalav Udavash. Means a poetic expression of abundance, of fertility and prosperity. It doesn't mean that a land that is flowing with, you get there, you'll be seeing milk, you'll be seeing honey flowing. No, it's just a poetic expression telling you that the land is full of abundance, is full of opportunity, is full of fertility, is full of prosperity. He also talk about a stiff neck, which means kwesh oref, meaning stubborn, obstinate, rebellious. He also talks about consume. Consume means kala. Consume in Greek, in Hebrew, means kala, which means to destroy or bring to an end. To destroy, or when the fire consumes something, so it destroy, it brings to an end but this one by divine judgment. So what is the meaning of this verse? What is the meaning of this verse? God promises to lead Israel to the promised land, but once he will not accompany them personally due to their rebellion. Are you rebelling against God? His presence is not abandonment. His presence, his absence. His absence, because God says, I'm not going to follow you, doesn't mean he abandoned them, but an act of mercy. But an act of mercy to prevent his holiness. He abandoned them, not that he hates them, but because of mercy. That's why he abandoned, so that his holiness will not consume their sinfulness. The holiness will not consume their sinfulness. Don't forget, our God is also a consuming fire. When you say God is love, it's also a consuming fire. This verse highlights the tension between God's faithfulness to his covenant and his holiness that judge sin. His covenant and his holiness that judge sins. It's not that he judges sinner, he judges sin. So he judges the sin in you, the nature of sin in you. So what is the significance of this place? God's faithfulness despite their sin. God honors his promise to Abraham. Genesis 12:7. He promised Abraham and he wants to fulfill it. God's holiness. Sin separates humanity. Sin separates humanity from God's presence. Therefore, need for mediation. Needs somebody to mediate between them. That's where set the stage for Moses' intercession of foreshadow of Christ. Foreshadow of Christ as our ultimate mediator when you study the book of 1 Timothy chapter 2 verse 5. Presence over blessing. Presence over blessing. Therefore, Moses wants the presence of God to follow them to the Canaan land that is flowing with milk and honey. If not, they are not going to go. Why? Because they love the presence of God more than blessing. Not nowadays that we love the blessing more than the presence of God. The true blessing is not the land. The true blessing is not the material things that you gain. The true blessing is not the marriage. The true blessing, but God's presence is the true blessing. When God's presence is with you, it will produce blessing. Blessing cannot produce God's blessing. So therefore, common interpretation. How do people interpret this place? Material prosperity focuses some emphasis the land flowing with milk and honey, ignoring the spiritual message that God's presence is more important than the gift. God's presence is more important. Therefore, God abandonment. Others misinterpret this as God forsaking Israel entirely. But the following verses, that is Exodus 33:14-16, shows he remains near through his mediator. That is, he was with them through his mediator. He was guiding them through Moses. Ignoring covenant mercy. This is not permanent rejection. It reflects God's justice and holiness balance together. So how do you now interpret it in today? The correct interpretation of that place. Value, that means you have to value God's presence over blessing. Material thing, you value God's presence over material things. Oh, I have car, I bought this. It's okay. But you value, because all those things can go. But if the presence of God leaves you, all those things will also go. But if those material things move away, get spoiled, get destroyed, the presence of God will produce another thing. Therefore, material things cannot produce the presence of God. But the presence of God can produce material things. Therefore, guard against stubbornness. Guard against stubbornness, so that rebellion and unrepentant heart hinder God's fellowship with us. When you are too rebellious, when you are too stubborn, when you don't obey God, so the fellowship of God will not be there. So intercede for others. Just like Moses intercedes, stand in the gap for those who have astray. Like Jesus is standing in the gap for you and I. Likewise, you and I have to also stand in the gap for people that are moving away from Christ. Intercede for others. So holiness and mercy, recognize God's holiness and gratefulness for his mercy through Jesus, who makes presence accessible. Therefore, Exodus 33:3. The real meaning is that it teaches us that God's promises remain, but his holy presence requires obedience, humility. Blessings without God's presence are empty. His nearest is the greatest treasure. God bless you. God be with you. In Jesus' mighty name, I say.